Welcome back to the Wedge 52 Gridiron Podcast. I'm your host, Wedge. Today's episode will be the AFC Championship Preview being hosted in Baltimore this Sunday at 3 p.m. facing off the Kansas City Chiefs at the Baltimore Ravens. Lamar Jackson versus Patrick Mahomes, Part 5. Currently, Mahomes leads that battle 3-1. With the most recent matchup being a Baltimore Ravens 36-35 victory. Before we jump into today's AFC Championship Preview, please make sure you press that follow button right here on Spotify, as well as check out the Instagram and Twitter at Wedge52Gridiron to stay up to date on all things Wedge52 Gridiron. Help this page grow. Thank you all for the support so far this season. Ravens fans, we are hoping to finish this one off strong. We have our biggest test of the season coming up this Sunday at 3 p.m. Like I said, the Baltimore Ravens in the divisional round beat the Texans 34-10, and the Kansas City Chiefs beat the Buffalo Bills 27-24. In that matchup, the Ravens offense on third down went 4 for 12, 2 for 2 on fourth down, had 229 rushing yards, 123 passing yards, good for 352 total yards of offense. The Ravens did allow 3 sacks and had 0 turnovers on the day. Looking at that Ravens defense against Houston, 4 for 12 third downs allowed, 0 for 1 fourth downs allowed, only 38 rushing yards allowed. Absolute dominant performance by that Ravens rushing defense, who has struggled a bit this year, potentially the only soft spot on that very, very dominant number one defense in the league is rushing yards allowed. Put up a statement against Houston, allowing only 38 rushing yards, 175 passing yards for 213 total yards of offense for the Texans, 0 sacks and 0 interceptions for that Baltimore defense, who led the league in both sacks and takeaways this season. And then kind of looking at the Kansas City Chiefs in their matchup against Buffalo. On third down, they went 1 for 5, 0 for 0 fourth down conversions, 146 rushing yards, 215 passing yards for 361 total yards. No sacks allowed and no interceptions by Patrick Mahomes. That Chiefs defense on the other side of the ball, 7 out of 14 third down conversions allowed, 2 for 3 fourth downs allowed by that Chiefs defense, 182 rushing yards, 186 passing yards for a total of 368 yards allowed. And then again for that Chiefs defense, 0 sacks and 0 interceptions in the divisional round for the Kansas City Chiefs. That Baltimore offense started off slow in the first half after not playing for nearly a month, at least the majority of the starters, but regardless, 3 weeks for, the rest of the team, 2 weeks off since that week 18, 3 weeks off for starters and key position guys. But second half was locked in and lights out after, what surfaced a, Lamar leadership takeover in that locker room to get the players locked back in for that second half, where they then went on to perform very well. The Kansas City Chiefs were in a slugfest against the Buffalo Bills. Chiefs and Bills matchups always turn into good games since Mahomes versus Allen era has been, existing these past 5 to 6 years, as well as, the Chiefs coming out on top in another good one. Buffalo missed a field goal with under 2 minutes left, I believe. Buffalo field goal went wide right. That would have tied the game, but also would have gave Mahomes the ball, with some time left. So we've seen how that happens. Mahomes is never out of it. The Chiefs and Mahomes get this victory, though. Looking at kind of the regular season, ranks, team stat ranks for both of these teams heading into the AFC Championship. We'll take a look at the Baltimore Ravens first. In terms of offensive yards, they are 5th, 385 yards per game. First in the league in rushing yards at 156. 4th in points at 28.4. And 8th on third downs at 42% success rate on third downs. And then looking at that Baltimore defense, ninth in the league in yards, 328 yards allowed per game, 14th rushing yards. Like I said, that's the one kind of soft spot of that defense if they have one. Still, on the better half of the league average at 14th with 109 yards allowed per game rushing. First in points allowed at 16.5 and seventh on third down at 36.4% allowed. And then looking at those Chiefs team stats for the regular season, their offense 11th in yards at 362 yards per game. Rushing yards 19th at 105 yards per game. 15th in points at 21.8. Definitely a sight that NFL fans are, not used to seeing in terms of the Chiefs not having, one of the top 5 scoring offenses in the league this year. Again, like I've been stressing on the Wedge 52 Gridiron podcast, if you have all, tuned in, you have heard me say their defense is very underrated, very sneakily, probably a top 6 defense in the league this year. First time Mahomes has had that as the starting quarterback. And then on third down for that Chiefs offense, 6th in the league at 43.6% throughout the regular season. And then looking at the defensive side of the ball for the Kansas City Chiefs, 3rd in yards allowed at 310 yards allowed per game, 17th in rushing yards at 113, 2nd in points allowed to just the Baltimore Ravens at 17.3, and 10th on third downs at 37.1% allowed for the Chiefs defense. Kind of a couple notes, before I head into the Baltimore Ravens keys to the game in the AFC Championship Preview. A couple of things, first that Texans, in that divisional round game against the Houston Texans, Texans offense had 5 false starts and 1 delay of game. That is the critical home field advantage of M&T Bank Stadium in that divisional round playoff. Expect the same energy from Baltimore Ravens fans in M&T Bank Stadium this upcoming Sunday. They have forced an incredible amount of false starts and delays of game this season while playing at home due to that very loud, contagious crowd energy around the Baltimore Ravens this season. Expect nothing less in this upcoming AFC Championship game. First AFC Championship game being hosted in Baltimore, in history. So Ravens fans definitely should be locked in, dialed up, and better be loud. Next note I have is the Baltimore Ravens, like I mentioned, started off slow and then going out absolutely lights out in the second half with the huge second half kickoff return to start things off there for them, and kind of never looked back from then on. And then defense allowing only 3 points offensively. The Texans scored 10, yes, but one of that coming on the punt return for a touchdown. Defense only allowing 3 points to that Houston Texans offense. Only one team allowed 0 offensive touchdowns to the Texans this season, to that very good offense by young rookie quarterback C.J. Stroud, Tank Dell the first half of the year till he got hurt, Nico Collins, Singletary. A pretty solid offense led by C.J. Stroud. Only one team did not allow them into the end zone offensively, and that was the Baltimore Ravens, who did it twice, both in the first game and the last game of the Houston Texans 2023 season. It was the first game of the year for the Baltimore Ravens, who did not have a sack. First game of the year, no sacks for that Ravens defense, who led the league with 61 sacks this season. Definitely look for that to change this upcoming Sunday in the AFC Championship game, as the Chiefs have allowed a sack in 15 out of 19 games this season. Definitely look for the Baltimore Ravens pass rush. Jadeveon Clowney, Justin Madubuike, Kyle Van Noy, Odafe Oweh, and others, even a little help sometimes from Kyle Hamilton and Patrick Queen getting in there. Definitely look for the Ravens defense to have a couple of sacks against Patrick Mahomes on Sunday. Now moving into the Ravens keys of the game. My first key of the game for the Baltimore Ravens in this AFC Championship is win the turnover battle. Ravens offense is 10th in giveaways per game, and that Kansas City defense is 28th in takeaways. What this means is the Baltimore Ravens are 10th best at protecting the football this season, not giving their opposing team extra opportunities as many times as possible. And that Kansas City defense, although being very good defensively this season, 28th in takeaways. They do not force a lot of takeaways. Let's not give them any takeaways to credit towards their defensive stat. Protecting the ball from our offense not only keeps the ball in Lamar Jackson's hands, future two-time MVP coming up here in a few weeks, regardless of the outcome of this game. Obviously, go Ravens, but future two-time MVP Lamar Jackson keeps the ball in his hands, the MVP on our team. Meanwhile, also keeping the ball out of the already two-time MVP quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes. Definitely want to keep the MVP, MVP duel in our favor. Doing that by protecting the football, winning that turnover battle. For the Chiefs offense, they are 25th in giveaways this season. They give away the ball a good amount, whether it be drops / tipped passes by Kansas City wide receivers or even tight ends, all pass catchers, or whether it be fumbles, putting the ball on the ground after running with it. Like we already saw in that Buffalo Bills game, Kansas City Chiefs had a couple of fumbles on that matchup. Not sure, how many of those were, fumbles lost, but they did put the ball on the ground a couple of times. Meanwhile, that Baltimore defense is third in takeaways throughout the season, throughout the entire season. Obviously, first in the year, first in the regular season with those 31, I believe, takeaways, most in the league in regular season for that Baltimore defense. Winning the turnover battle is my first key to success for the Baltimore Ravens. My second key to success for the Baltimore Ravens in this AFC Championship game is going to be run the ball. Ravens offense ranks third in the league on yards per carry at 5 yards per carry, and first in the league at yards per game at 160.6 yards per game, counting that playoff win. First in yards per game and third in yards per carry, going against a Chiefs defense who allows seventh highest yards per carry at 4.5 yards per carry allowed this season, and 18th in rushing yards per game defensively, including the playoffs at 114.9 yards per game. Definitely using the running game to create explosive plays via Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, even Dalvin Cook, who started his first attempt, first rushing attempt as a Baltimore Raven, was his longest rush of the season. We all know what Dalvin Cook is capable of, posting, I believe, over 1,000 yards in the past 4 seasons, not counting this year. But Dalvin Cook is definitely a playmaker, probably still has, a good amount of juice left, at least in this limited capacity of playing time that he will, most likely be getting here. And, of course, Lamar Jackson, able to run the ball, definitely yards per carry. I want to say just over the 6 yards per carry mark this season yet again. Exploiting that Kansas City Chiefs rushing defense is my second key to the game for the Baltimore Ravens. My third key to the game for the Baltimore Ravens is going to be protect Lamar Jackson. Ravens are 24th in sacks allowed based on percentage of dropbacks. 24th lowest in the league, so not a good thing. 8th highest, sacks allowed per percentage of based off percentage of dropbacks versus that Chiefs defense who gets a sack on 7.86% of opposing quarterback dropbacks. Definitely a critical thing here to protect Lamar Jackson. The Chiefs defense is first in the league with those sack percentage on opposing quarterbacks. Definitely something that needs to be emphasized. Definitely need to protect Lamar Jackson and win that sack battle, especially with Ronnie Stanley and Morgan Moses, both kind of been on and off this year struggling a bit. Potentially some of that due to health reasons, especially with Ronnie Stanley. The past, 4, 5, 6 weeks of the season and into that Houston Texans game, the offensive line at the tackle position, they have been giving Stanley and Moses drives off during the game, which is something that you don't see very often in the NFL in terms of healthy starters, primarily healthy enough to start to play at the offensive line position, but seeing a rotation of offensive linemen being utilized by that Baltimore Ravens offense, definitely something that the Baltimore Ravens need to do, especially off the edge, is protecting Lamar Jackson. In terms of the other positions, Tyler Linderbaum, not worried about him on that inside, and the guards have played solid for the majority of the year. Simpson's had, a couple of issues here and there, but primarily good, should be good with the help of Linderbaum and most likely Ronnie Stanley for the majority of the game over there. So those are my Ravens keys to success. That is my AFC Championship Preview. Baltimore Ravens, Kansas City Chiefs, Lamar Jackson versus Patrick Mahomes, Part 5. This time for a trip to the Super Bowl in Las Vegas. Only one team will make it. Thank you all for listening. Please make sure you press that follow button right here on Spotify, as well as check out the Instagram and Twitter. And the most important part, go Ravens.